Welcome to Pique My Interest, a podcast dedicated to creativity. My name is Scoob Decker, and I am an artist, and your host. PMI is an exploration in meeting some incredible artists, learning about their craft, and exploring what makes them create. I visited the desert to learn about this world-class glassmaker. Mark Leputa has a background in engineering, and explored many different mediums, and eventually stumbled into his love for this craft. I was able to watch Mark turn up the heat and blow glass in the furnaces at the Sonoran Glass Studio, as well as see his work showcased at the Philibom Glass Gallery. Not only is he a phenomenal glassblower, but his specialty is the cold cutting and grinding of glass sculptures once they are completely cool. I was able to visit his personal studio, where I was immersed in unique cutting tools and grinding equipment, while surrounded by hundreds of vibrant glass projects of varied steps and completion. Glassmaking is a multi-step beast that Mark has mastered, but explains that it is necessary to have collaboration and communication to be successful. This episode was recorded on April 24th in Tucson, Arizona. I hope you look up their work and your interest is piqued. I hope you're having a grand day, and please enjoy this week's episode I've titled, It's Just Glass. Hello, and welcome to Pique My Interest. I am currently in Tucson, Arizona, sitting with Mark Leputa. How you doing today, Mark?
I'm great. Just got done blowing glass and happy. A little sweaty, but...
A little sweaty, yeah. I watched you a little bit. You're getting a little sweaty, but you're doing some amazing things. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Mark Leputa. I am originally from Pennsylvania. I studied at the University of Pittsburgh, not glass. After graduating, I decided to take a trip. I ended up going to New Zealand. It was supposed to be a 6-month trip. It is where I found glass blowing, and that 6-month trip turned into a 3-year apprenticeship. From there, I moved back to the States and studied under an artist named Cal Breed in Northeast Alabama, and I stayed there for about 14 years before moving to Tucson and opening my own studio with my best buddy, Steve Hagen.
Shout out to Steve. Hey, Steve. You mentioned that you are a glass maker. What is your specialty within glass making?
I'd say I'm most known for cold working, which is the grinding and cutting of the glass once it's cold. Over the course of my career, I really dove deep into learning how to be a glass blower as well. So I kind of have both of those skills, and I take those and kind of meld them into my own artistic creations, which happen to be very heavily carved and polished abstract sculptures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
among other things.
Looking at your work, it's a little different. It's not just a vase or a sculpture. I mean, you can see the hours put into grinding and cutting away these things, which I am fairly unfamiliar with. So I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about that. What was your upbringing that turned you into a creator?
It's a good question. I was always making art, and I don't sit still ever. I'm always moving and doing stuff. I had an aunt and uncle that always kind of got me art supplies and stuff for birthdays and holidays, so I think that helped keep fueling the fire. When I went to college, I went originally to be an engineer. I wanted to be a bicycle designer. I was big into BMX at the time. And as an engineer, I just, it wasn't hands-on like I wanted it to. I wanted to design and build. And they just wanted you to study calculus and physics and all this stuff. And it was taking away from hands-on stuff that I felt I needed. I was kind of lost after graduating. And when I found glassblowing in New Zealand, by accident, basically got hired at a glass studio. I think they were originally looking for someone like a little old lady to work in the gallery. And when I came in, I was 24 and reasonably fit. And they were just like, oh, this guy can do all the cutting and grinding. And I was just thrown in. And from there, I basically am self-taught. And glass is just like, oh my God, this is exactly what I've been looking for. Because it's super creative, but at the same time, it's very regimented in you have to learn all these things to be good, and it takes a very long time. And as a stubborn individual, that kind of thing is just right up my alley. Just, oh, this is really hard and most people can't do it. All right, let's try.
I mean, it's very clear that you have a passion for this. I mean, I met you yesterday at the Philibom Glass Gallery. I watched you work at the Sonoran Glass School. Obviously, when you started, something about it piqued your interest.
Yeah.
Why glass?
I had tried different. I do have like a studio arts background when I was at university, but it was like the fundamental kind of mediums like painting and drawing and sculpting with clay and stuff, and I loved all those, but it just wasn't the medium I was looking for. And I couldn't say why, but once I saw and found glass, I don't know, maybe it's like the pyro in me or something, but it's just like, this is it. This is like what I want to do. And it just like kind of took over. Mm-hmm. And from that job in New Zealand, I just knew this is just what I want to do. Yeah. And I want to put all of my energy into learning as much as I can about the medium, as far as like being a glass blower, being a cold worker, how do you make money at this, just all of it, just full steam ahead. Like, this is what I want to do. Unfortunately, the visa I had in New Zealand was only good for that one particular studio, and there was already other glass blowers there, so there wasn't a whole lot of room to advance and get more time in the hot shop blowing glass. Like, I was just an apprentice. So my buddy Chris that I worked with there, he said, you got to move back to America. Like, next to Italy, there's no better place in the world to learn glass. There's just so many talented individuals to learn from. And this craft is very much like a passed down through generations kind of thing. A lot of the techniques and stuff, almost all of them, have come from Italy, and they've been passed down now. They were used to be very withholding of their information. In fact, if a glassblower left the Isle of Murano, they would be like hunted down because they didn't want anyone to take the techniques away. It was very secretive. Wow. Now it's like everyone's an open book, and the medium is thriving because of it. And you can't just keep secrets and expect the things to keep growing. It's very stale that way. Yeah, you have to go and you need to learn from people, and you need to put a lot of time in learning from them. And in that regard, like, on the other end of the spectrum, teaching someone, you have to know that they really want it. Otherwise, it is like a huge time suck. Yeah. Because you're just putting in so much energy to someone that might walk away. Mm-hmm. So I was fortunate enough to find Cal Breed in Alabama, and we worked together from 2007 till 2020. And he was just a phenomenal teacher and human being. I learned so much from him, not just in glass, but just life and how to observe the world and find little details in the world that you might use in your art or inspiration. And yeah, I found a great mentor.
You've been inspired. You started cutting. You've got the bug. You started getting better. You're in galleries now. Yeah. You're selling things for thousands of dollars. To me, that sounds like success. Can you define success in your craft? Do you consider yourself successful? And what really got you succeeding?
I kind of go back and forth with this one a lot. And you always have to look back at what you've done to remind yourself how far you've come. But I think I find myself successful in that now I'm fully self-employed. I don't work for anyone else. Steve and I, my studio partner, we work together. Basically, we trade off assisting each other because glassblowing is very team-oriented. So you need other people helping you anyway. So we kind of trade off assisting and working together, and we bounce ideas off of each other. But other than that, we're our own artists, we're our own businesses. And I think the way I would define my success is that there's no one around telling me where to be, when to be, or what to be.
Or how to be.
Or how to be. Yeah. And so I get to, it's like choose your own adventure. And you get what you put into it. So I think that to me is success.
We talked a little bit yesterday about how there might be some months where you might not sell anything and you start questioning
terrifying.
everything. But then the next month you sell a few pieces and there's the confidence right now.
Yeah. I think at this point in my career, I just know that you have to keep making. And there is always these dry spells. I mean, being a self-employed artist that relies solely on like selling their creations, it's like being a surfer. Sometimes there's waves and sometimes you're just sitting out there. And so you got to just, the set is coming eventually and you just got to wait. But you got to also, in that downtime, it isn't downtime. You have to keep making, because once things do start to sell, and for my work in particular, each piece takes so long. So I'm not cranking out thousands of pieces a year. It's like 20 pieces a year. So yeah, you just got to keep making and know that you're still putting out this great work, and someone will eventually see it and buy it, hopefully.
And what I really love about your work, it's so diverse. You have several different series, which I was unfamiliar with glassmakers. You have things like the landscape series. You have your Oculus series. You've got, I don't know, we're sitting in your studio and we're just surrounded by beautiful, colorful, carved, cut glass. Where do you get your creativity? Tell us about your creation process.
Well, a lot of the inspiration for the work comes from my travels and being in nature. I say I'm a rock climber, but I haven't really gotten to go rock climbing much in like the last year. I'm a runner. I just love being outdoors. I don't like to be inside. A day inside is a day wasted. And living in Arizona, it's like beautiful every day, so there's no rest days. What was the question?
Well, we started talking about your hobbies. That's the next question. Yeah. But I want to know about your creation process. How do you, when you picture something in your mind, how do you start? How do you think of it?
Yeah. A lot of ideas kind of steamroll from the previous work. So as I built my career, I would make these objects because the glass blowing process is fairly fast. But then once everything's cold and I start to cut it and carve it, it's a really slow process. So you're really with an object for a long time and you're slowly manipulating it. And most of my process is the removal process. So I'm taking away from what I've already created to get an end result. And so as I'm like cutting and carving, I could kind of see different forms and shapes and ideas as I'm going. And sometimes in that moment, I will change my original plan and move in that direction. But other times, I'll stick to my plan of what I was originally hoping to achieve. But I'll make a mental note of like, okay, with this shape of an object and these kind of cuts, it can look like this. And so I'll branch off into these different directions from those previous pieces. Even though all of my series look and feel very different, they are still rooted in the fundamental creation process of glass and cold working glass. So
yeah, and you're inspired by nature as well.
Yeah, a lot of the work looks, I'm not trying to directly duplicate nature other than maybe that geothermal series. It looks very much like geothermal landscapes like Yellowstone or other places like that, Iceland. And I have traveled to these places a lot. And, you know, one of the things I really try and do is take a lot of photographs of these places, and not just like photographs of the whole place, minute details that most people probably would miss, because sometimes that might dictate the shape I'm going to make, or the shape of some of these hot springs and hot pools, the way that the shape of the outer edge of the pool itself might be the way I cut open the sculpture, and that might be the way I find my form that I'm looking for. So a lot of that has to come into it. And another way I really like to work is I really like to dive really deep, and I work my ass off, and I love to be in the studio to the point where I'm like so fatigued that I have to walk away. And then I'll take huge breaks. My wife and I will go on like a month or two long road trip in our little conversion van we have, and I'll check out completely. I won't answer emails, which I'm terrible at anyway. and I just check out of glass, and I just have to be away from it. But by the time our trips are kind of coming down to the end, I'm itching to get back in the studio because I have all these new ideas from these places I've been, and then I have to put them into the work. And, you might see a tree. I'm not going to sculpt a tree, but maybe the way the tree bark looked might be a texture that I use or try to achieve. So that is the way that nature is inspired into my work rather than trying to duplicate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've also answered...
And colors, for sure.
Ooh, yeah. You've also answered another one of my questions.
Yes.
A little bit about when you come into a creative block, as all artists do, what are your techniques to try and either get back into it or refresh yourself? And you say just kind of stepping away for a while.
You have to. You don't want to get burned out. You have to just like, if you have the capability of like just removing yourself from your work for a little bit and doing something else, whether it's going running or I don't know, even just like feeling out a different art form just for play. Not like I'm not going to be a painter or anything, but my wife's a great painter and she paints at nights a lot. So I'll sit and doodle or something, and I'm not trying to design glass or anything. I'm just sketching, and I don't even know what I'm going to make. But maybe what I put on paper might somehow inspire some new idea that I'll make in the glass studio.
For newcomers who don't know much about glass blowing, in about 2 minutes, can you explain the process of glass blowing?
In 2 minutes. I will try. So in a glass studio, there is a furnace that has a molten crucible of molten glass. There's a blowpipe, which is basically a hollow tube. You get the end of the tube a little bit hot. Glass is sticky by nature, but it sticks better to other hot things. So you go in there with the pipe and you rotate basically like you're getting honey out of a jar. The warmer the honey is, the faster it drips. Same with glass. The hotter it is, the more liquid it is. As it cools, it starts to become more globby, I guess, and then it's a rock. So you're constantly trying to maintain heat. You can only manipulate it. You only have like a window of a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds, if you get it hot to the point where it's already getting cold. So you don't want it to become a rock again, because then you're just wasting your time heating it up. So you're constantly maintaining that malleability of the glass. And you usually have a friend working with you, an assistant, and they blow into the pipe and inflate it. And you're basically what you're doing to try and shape a bubble, which if you blow directly into a pipe with hot glass, it's going to be round. You're going to blow up a round bubble. If you're making a vase or anything and it's a different shape, basically what you're trying to do is control where the heat is and cool off certain areas so that it inflates in the hot areas. And that's basically how you shape things. You're not forcing things into shape. You're cooling things so that it inflates in other areas.
Interesting. Yeah, I got to watch Steve and Mark earlier in Sonoran Glass Studio, and it's choreography. It's a dance.
Very much so, yeah.
You know exactly where to go. You have that internal couple seconds. You know when to do it, when to tap, 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 break, good, okay, over here. And it's just unbelievable to think about these ovens are over 1,000 degrees. You said 1,000.
Yeah, 2,000. Like the ovens are 2,000. The glass, we typically work probably between like 1,200 and 1,800 degrees. The glass coming out of the furnace is over 2,000. But once you get it out of the furnace and you shape it a little bit, and then you start to inflate it and it becomes thinner, you can't ever really get it that hot again. If you do, it crumples. So you're trying to stay in this window, and I never really thought about it until the last few years, but there's like so much physics and thermodynamics and all this stuff that's intuitive as a glass blower, but we don't even know we're doing that. We don't even know we're that smart, that we know like those kind of things. But I've seen scientists now that have been doing different things with glass blowers, and there's different YouTube channels and stuff, and they break down the science of glass making and things, and it's wild, like what we're doing from intuition and from basically experience. Like the more experience you have, the more fluid you are with the material. But those are the things you're controlling.
Mm-hmm. And your specialty is more after the glass is cooled.
For sure.
Come back to this studio, and I'm looking at your grinding equipment.
Yeah.
How long does it take you to grind out one of your pieces?
The larger sculptures, particularly the tensile series, which is these pieces behind you, and what I'd say I've probably become most known for. I mean, after all the glass blowing and the different early steps, which are all their own days in and of themselves, I finally get this, basically a big thick bubble that I made, and it has different colors and patterns on it. But when I start to carve and cut into it to make the final shape and form, they could take weeks. So, and that's like multiple 8-hour days of just like refining. You grind it and it's rough and it looks cruddy, and then you go back to finer and finer and finer grits until you get that perfect polish. And what I hope to achieve is that it looks like that's just the way it was. Like there's no hand of the maker in it. It's just like perfect and beautiful. And how did he do that? That's what I hope for.
How often while you're working do you let the piece change or adapt? Or do you really have that in mind, and you've been doing this for how long?
20 years.
A few years. Do you just kind of know, like, this is how it's going to go, this is how it needs to look, I just need to form it to go like this? Or do you let it kind of shape itself if it starts to do something different?
Definitely, there's a game plan in the beginning. Sometimes the glass dictates what it wants to do. For my work in particular, like I said, I'll make these big, thick bubbles. Once they're cool, I take them back to the shop here where I'm cutting and grinding them. Say, while I was in the making process at the glass studio blowing glass, maybe there was some bubbles in the glass or something, and I don't want them in the final product. And I know I'm removing material, so I might choose to remove those particular spots where these tiny blemishes are, just so that they're not in the final product. So that is one way that the glass kind of guides me. If the bubble that I want to cut out is in this one particular spot, then the shape of that object and the cutting of it is going to dictate like what that is going to look like. So, like trying to remove blemishes or something, or say it cracks, but it's not like all the way cracked and ruined, and I know I'm going to like cut that part away. Those kind of things can like steer me unbeknownst to like my original plan. Right, but sometimes I end up with like forms and shapes and I would have never dreamt or planned of cutting it that way. Yeah. But because something happened and I have to fix something, it goes that direction, and I end up with these end results that those are like usually my favorite pieces. Yeah. Like, whoa, this is so cool. And then that's when you're like, okay, I steer in this direction now, or like I changed this, or the glasses tell me to do this today. So you just got to pay attention and listen. The piece behind you, actually, I had like days of work into it, and then I was cutting in like the last hole that I wanted to have in it, and it cracked, and it didn't crack really badly, but I had to get rid of it before the crack. Because I was watching it like continue to like creep, and it was starting to creep into the sculpture to the point where it was going to be just ruined. And yeah, so that like guided me, and I fixed it, and it looks great. But it did change like the original plan a little bit, but I still love it. And it's a little different than what it originally would have been, but I think it's actually better than what I would have created because of what happened. Don't tell anyone else about that crack. Just kidding. I just told everyone. But it does happen.
Speaking of cracks, how often do you have an something breaking, something falling? Like I said, watching the pipes and the glass bulbs just flying around, and you're just shoving them every which way. And I know I would run into a door, I would hit the ground, and just ruin the whole thing.
It does happen. I'd like to think at this point, 20 years into my career, it doesn't happen that often. And it doesn't. Sometimes it's not even within your power. I mean, this time last year, Steve and I had a really good day in the glass studio. Each of us made maybe like 3 really big sculptures, And then, when we finish glass blowing, everything we make goes into a kiln and an annealer. And over the course of overnight or over the course of 2 or 3 days, depending on what the object is, they have to cool really slowly. And this particular time, the thermocouple on that kiln malfunctioned, and the kiln just turned itself on full blast. When people came back into the studio the next day or whatever, they looked in the kiln, and everything was just a puddle. So you can't anticipate that, and there's nothing you can do with it after the fact, but it does happen, and you just got to keep going. This just happens, and I think as a glassmaker, and definitely someone that's been blowing glass for 20 years, it's happened to everyone. There's always these horror stories, but it's just glass. And I've even heard of people in glass, like going to college for glass, and their professor like makes them make something like early on, like your first year or something. Make the best thing you ever made. Now smash it. So you learn to not become so attached to something.
Yeah.
Because sometimes things just fail.
Yeah.
But not too often, hopefully.
Speaking of learning from failures, do you recommend going to school or taking classes to build on glassmaking? Or would you advise just going and finding an expert and trying to take an apprenticeship?
I think there's lots, everyone has their own story on how they got into glass and how they became educated in glass. Steve in particular went to university for glass, and then he got a master's in it. The guy I learned from also went to school for glass. I just happened to find a studio and learn on the job. If I had to choose, I say learn on the job because you're getting paid to learn rather than paying to learn. But everyone's different, and everyone finds themselves and their footing differently. And so there is no right or wrong way, but there is a lot of different avenues. But regardless of how you do it, you will be learning from other people. You can't feel your way through this blindly. You'll go broke for one. It's so expensive. But yeah, the early pioneers of American glass were just feeling their way through the dark until Italians came. It was like, what are you guys doing? You got to do it like this. You guys, it's too cold for one. You're working with rocks. So you have to learn from people that are much, much better than you. And I think that's the best way to learn in anything.
How do you handle criticism? Has anybody come up to you?
Poorly. No, just kidding.
Has anybody come up and just said, I don't get it? Or why?
Yeah, but you're not making it for those people. I mean, I don't make it for anyone but me anyway. Back to the success thing, I think you have to make what you like, and you just hope that someone else appreciates it. And there's so many people in the world that there's definitely going to be people out there that appreciate it. Everyone likes something different, and what you're doing, you might not have found the people that dig it yet, but you will. And you just gotta find that tribe of people that are on the same wavelength as you. I don't even know if that answered the question, but I hope it did.
No, absolutely. Are there any misconceptions about your craft?
I don't know. I don't know how I could really answer that question.
Well, let me tell you, the misconception I have,
let's hear it.
Glass blowers, they just make pipes all day.
There is a lot of glass blowers that make pipes, and I will say that they are cutting edge at their craft. A lot of those people have developed techniques that no one has done before. So the pipe makers do get a bad rep, but I think that's almost gone at this point.
Well, nowadays there's so much science involved that they're all almost scientists themselves.
They are. There's so much chemistry involved in glass making, and then, like I said, the thermodynamics and understanding heat and cooling and all that. But I don't know. I just hope people appreciate what we do. There is a TV show on Netflix now. It's in its 4th season called Blown Away, which I think is really bringing the awareness of glass blowing to the common household. It's one of the most watched shows on Netflix, and like I said, it's in its 4th season now. And I've had so many friends that have been part of that show at this point. So it's really cool to go and watch your friends on TV. I think that's helping to, like I said, raise awareness of the craft, but also people know a lot more. You can't go into a studio now anywhere in this country and not have someone walk in, maybe not every day, but probably like once a week at least. Be like, have you seen the show Blown Away? And it's like, of course I have. But yeah, I just think, they kind of see what it takes and what we do and that things break. And I think there's just more of an appreciation for it than there probably was before, because just it wasn't really on people's radar.
Most artists I talk to about these competition shows hate them. They think that they misconstrue what the craft is. Like a tattoo artists might not like that cutthroat mentality of those shows and how like gritty and all it is, when there could be just like a very beautiful tattoo artist who likes to express themselves. Or a baker I just interviewed in San Francisco. It's just like they like to highlight all the drama and not highlight the beauty and the techniques and the textures of the cake. But I do think that Blown Away is a great awareness raiser for anybody who's unfamiliar with it. So
I feel like early on in the show, they were trying to make it more about the drama between different artists and stuff. But glassblowing, even though it's global, is a really small community, and it's like the Kevin Bacon thing, like how many people removed are you from this other person? And I think within glassblowing, you're probably only like at most like two or three people removed. Maybe only one, so we kind of all know each other or know someone that knows someone.
It's a very close community.
It is. So like trying to show that drama or create it out of thin air just to have a TV show is foolish. And I think that the creators of the show also understood that, probably from the glassblowers that have been on the show, because now in its fourth season, and especially like the last two seasons, it's been so much more about camaraderie. All these people know each other. They're friends outside of this television show. Yes, they're in competition with each other and they want to beat each other, but it's more like a lifestyle sport where you're trying to one up your buddy, but like you're also cheering them on. And that is really what glassblowing is, because it's a team-oriented art form.
Well, and watching you earlier today, you couldn't do that by yourself.
No.
And
I couldn't do it if I cursed at Steve like the whole time either. He wouldn't want to work with me, and then you're there by yourself.
Speaking of TV shows, what's next for the world of glassmaking?
I have no idea, but I
usually ask this question in terms of like artificial intelligence and how technology
stuff freaks me out.
Yeah. How that might influence it a little bit, but just in general, are there people coming up with new techniques? Are there new people just blowing the competition away?
It's such an old art form that it's really difficult to come up with completely brand new techniques. I think what is happening now, like more information is available, more people are willing to share information, and everyone is growing together. I think the speed at which people get really good at glassblowing or glass making, and there's other art forms of glass besides just glassblowing, but I think the speed at which people become really proficient is like much, much quicker. Mm-hmm. Also, I think, with the television show or, just people finding glass more easily with Instagram or any social media or YouTube or whatever, like, I think people are getting into it younger too. I started when I was 24, but some people are starting now like in their teens. Yeah. So by the time they're 24, they might have like 10 years under their belt already. So they're
the old
rippers.
Italians are out.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. You can never beat them.
And what's next for you personally? Any new series in your mind?
Just recently I started a new series. It started out to be smaller objects. And, these sculptures take weeks to finish. That is not always financially... You don't financially thrive from working on one object for like weeks at a time and not have other things out there to sell. So I started developing some other new ideas, and they're starting to become bigger now, and they're starting to take longer and longer. And maybe that's just me and there's something wrong with me, but that's the way it goes. But they have been really well received, and this tensile series that I've really become known for, I've been working on for almost like 7 or 8 years. So I'm really looking for something fresh and new to do. It's all going to still hopefully feel like Mark Leputa work because I'm the maker. And they're not too far removed. Like I'm still trying to focus on optics and, really exploit the optical qualities of glass. Really clean, simple objects that there's no hiding. You can't like flub your way through it and like have these little defects and stuff in it because you'll see they're like blatantly obvious, where maybe different objects and different ways of applying color, you can kind of bury these kind of dirty spots and bubbles and things. And yeah, I think that what I love about glass is how pure it can be. So I'm like striving for that constantly, but that's been my whole career. So I don't know if that necessarily answers the question of what's new coming up, but yeah, I do have like a bunch of new series that I'm really starting to dive into now and leave the Tensile series. I'll never abandon that series, and I do love making those objects, but I'll probably make less of them every year just because they take up my time. There's more ideas than time at this point.
To all my peakers out there, please check out Mark's work. It is gorgeous. It's stunning. It'll take your breath away. Even from just pictures, it'll just make you go, how on earth did you do that? Any fun or interesting stories about your craft just off the top of your head?
Yeah, but they can't be told on here. No, I guess I don't know if this would fully answer the question, but some of my favorite moments in my career revolving around glass have been when I went like just fully self-employed on my own, and Steve and I were trying to find our way to making our own studio and trying to figure out where it was going to be. It was originally supposed to be in Oregon, where Steve was living at the time, and we just couldn't afford it. And just the whirlwind of trying to find our own space and place and where we wanted to end up. We live in Tucson now. We came to Tucson because the Sonoran Glass School is here. We found it online and called them and talked to them, and we did a road trip here. We did a residency in Florida, and then we both road tripped back over here to Tucson and spent the better part of a week just working at the school and just seeing what the city had to offer. And we fell in love with the place, ended up moving here. But since then, we've done multiple little road trips, basically like going on glass tour. We go to different like friends' studios and work for a bit. The way Steve and I work is we can go blow glass for an extended period of time at a studio, say a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But then when we have all those objects, we can bring them back to our shop. And then that's when like the long, slow process of finishing them takes place. And so we can go and work at these friends' studios and then come back here, and we have enough stuff to work on for the better part of a year.
It's just such a close-knit community.
Yeah.
Glass blowers and glass makers.
And just going on a road trip with your friend,
sure.
Regardless of it being like, work related, we just have a blast. And going to visit all the people that we don't get to see every day and working with them and helping them make their work too. People have come to visit here because of that, and now there's back and forth from all these different parts of the country with different artists that we're friends with, and we can go there and help them and work, and they can come here, and they might just be passing through Tucson. Hey, let's make some work, and you can put it in the gallery here in Tucson. And so it's just this symbiotic thing that's
one of my favorite
special.
Stories you told me yesterday in the gallery was when you and your wife were doing things in Canada, bouncing around, getting paperwork for whatever, and you just go, hey, look, there's a glass studio, and you go in and you end up talking to people that you have common people interested, and they might know who you are.
Do you want me to go down into that story?
Let's do it.
All right. So my wife and I, for the last 3 years, we reconnected through COVID. And, we originally met in 2010 at the Pilchuck Glass School. She's also a glass maker. There was 10 years where we just kind of remained friends, and we would talk to each other here and there. And it was always like trying to see if the other person was single, maybe. Through COVID and myself trying to move to Oregon to open the shop with Steve, Melanie and I reconnected, and she ended up flying to the Southeast, and then we took the conversion van and we road tripped to Oregon. First time hanging out together in a decade, and we spent every second together for about a month. A couple months later, we were getting married. She's from Canada, so we were stuck in the immigration process. We started the immigration process like right at the start of 2021, and we only recently got her green card this past September 2023. In doing so, as a Canadian, there's only one city where you can go, and you have to have an in-person interview. So we were in Montreal, and while we were in Montreal, she had to take a physical, and then there was the in-person interview. The first time we went to Montreal was for the physical, and then there was about a week in between, and we were back in Montreal. But that first trip, we were in a gallery, and a fellow glass artist recognized me from Instagram. And so we went out for beers like immediately after leaving the gallery. And we told him, we're like coming back in like 2 weeks, so we'll hang out. So we came back, and Mel had to have her interview. So we hung out with, his name's David. He's awesome. Shout out to David in Montreal. And so we hung out with David, and he works out of a public studio called Espèce. So we went and watched David work at Espèce. The next day, Mel had her interview at the consulate, and she sits down, and the woman asks her, "How'd you meet your husband?" "Well, we're glassblowers." "Oh, no way, that's so cool. Are you a glassblower from Montreal?" And Melanie's like, "No, I live in Calgary, but we know glassblowers here now." And she's like, "That's so cool. I'm going to Espèce this afternoon. We were there yesterday." And she maybe asked her like 2 or 3 more questions, and enjoy your life in Tucson. And that was that. And there was all these like weird little glass things that like guided us through the process. And then by the time we were back from Montreal, the green card had already arrived. And so we were packing her stuff up, and we were moving Mel down to Tucson, driving the vehicles. And, you got to cross the land border in Montana. And we pull up to the border guard, and he asks us some questions, and he asks us what we do. We're glass blowers. "Oh, no shit, my cousin's a glass blower." "Well, what's his name?" "Chris Duffy." "Oh, I know that guy. He buys tools from me." So it's like there was all these weird little finite glass things that were somehow part of our process. Like the glass gods were just like helping us, like, this is the path you're supposed to be on. Just keep going down this path. And yeah, here we are, living in Tucson.
Fantastic.
It's great.
Here in Tucson, you can check out some of Mark's stuff at the Philibom Gallery. You can also check out the Sonoran Glass Studio, where he's often working and blowing glass. You can see all sorts of artists working. Where can we find some of your stuff?
You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I don't really touch Facebook too much anymore, so I would say I'm almost exclusively Instagram at markleputaglass.com. Leputa, Leputa. And yeah.
And a website?
There. markleputa.com.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful website that you put
And
together.
I sell my glass in select galleries throughout the country. Aspen, Colorado, Santa Fe, New Mexico, here in Tucson, St. Petersburg, Florida are probably the main ones that I'm in, and then a few others. But yep, check them out.
I can't thank you enough for joining me and piquing my interest. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, I'm happy. Thank you, Scoob. This was awesome.
I do finish with one last question.
Let's do it.
Throw you off a little bit. If you could excel at any other craft besides your own, what would you want to do?
I think if I could do anything else, maybe not. It probably wouldn't be craft. I think I would probably be a national park ranger.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe not art at all.
Yeah.
But I'd be outdoors all day, hopefully, not in an office.
Well, you also gave us the recommendation to go to Mount Lemmon today.
Yeah, it was spectacular.
Gorgeous up there. So much fun. Thank you for that. And thank you to all my peakers out there. Please let me know if you know of any special or unique artists or art forms you think I should explore. I'm currently in Tucson, Arizona, and can't wait to see where Pique My Interest takes me next. Remember, creativity comes from the heart. Push yourself. Be kind to each other. I'm Scoob Decker, and thank you for helping me pique my interest.
Thank you.